MTTB Music Podcast.
Hear the theme music in the background.
It's always good when you hear the theme music.
Hello again, dear listener. As we're back. Actually, we're back on a. The sun is coming out. Bizarrely, the sun is now coming out.
Is it? Oh, excellent.
It's almost 8:30, so the sun is coming out just before it goes down on a day that was meant to be gloriously sunny that hasn't really been.
Oh, well, welcome to summer 2021, folks.
Yeah, and also we are just a few days away from freedom, or I don't want your freedom. Okay, our two listeners have now
Got the joke.
Gone. And we're now broadcasting to ourselves, which will be
Excellent.
a bit like the old days,
Good.
really.
It's a bit like the old days. We got rid of everyone. Good.
So,
right, let's press on.
Podcast 5. We have John Grant, Boy from Michigan. We have the Veronicas, Human. We have Tyler the Creator, Call Me If You Get Lost. Pom Pom Squad, Death of a Cheerleader. Doja Cat, Planet Her. And Sault 9. So we are going to start off with 5th solo album from Mr. Grant. We previously reviewed his 3rd album, Grey Tickle's Black Pressure. God. Which was on podcast 10, 2015, if you want to go back and check it out.
Wow.
And of course his 2nd album and a former CTTB Album of the Year for 2013.
Yes.
The still really fucking
Awesome.
good Pale Green Ghosts, which was on
Indeed.
podcast 4 of 2013.
My God, you got these written down somewhere or something?
I have.
Right.
It's almost like I've done research and
When
shit.
did this cataloguing start?
I don't know. I just decided that, you know,
Lockdown.
after kind of 11, 12 years, you know, being professional and kind of mentioning the fact we reviewed people before, and when we review them, might be a good kind of like, you know, kind of cross pollination.
I know. I'm enjoying it. It's good.
Anyway, from what I just said there, you will notice that we skipped the last album.
Mm-hmm.
Read into that what you will, really. Anyway, we are back with this album, Boy from Michigan, Peter.
So, John Grant's 5th album is overall, musically, I felt much tighter than either, Grey Tickle's Black Pressure,
Yeah.
or whatever subsequently followed that I may have listened to, but we never reviewed.
Yeah, it was. That was more. It was definitely more of an electronic, slightly more, slightly more. I suppose slightly more dancey poppy type thing. Really,
it is. But I felt that with both those albums, and it never, and with Grey Tickles, I felt it never really built on the sort of masterpiece that was Pale Green Ghost, and I think Pale Green Ghost is, you know, a high watermark in terms of
absolutely
albums he's done, and obviously it was our favourite album of that particular year. And go back and listen, listener, if you're still there, because there's a reason for that. So I felt that this was, as an album, was compared with previous solo albums, it felt much more focused, much more settled in the production than since, and dare I say, his best since. Not quite his best, but certainly his best since, and I felt this felt like a real follow up to that sort of masterpiece of Pale Green Ghost. I really enjoyed this album.
Yeah.
I hope it goes without saying. Very much liked the production. There is a few things that rattle through this album. There's very similar territory to previous albums, but I also feel that lyrically, a dive into his upbringing, nostalgia, there is a much more of a catharsis in the lyrics, whereas Pale Green Ghost, and I'm trying not to compare it too much to that album, felt very much more edgier, and felt very much more open-ended in terms of his own personal experience with his sexuality, but also with the situation he now finds himself in.
yes.
As a result, I think the title, obviously reflects his homeland of Michigan, and very much that the sort of upfield of his upbringing, his nightmares on the track The Rusty Bull.
Currently just making a comment about that. For
and then the thoughts on the current state, or current as well when recorded. Well, actually, no, it's still current state of politics in the US, and the sort of death of the American dream, how that perhaps rusted away in the Rust Belt. It's all there to unpack. So as I say, his best since. Also liked, though, there were some really warm moments on this album, and I don't know if you picked up on this. There's a recurrent clarinet that sort of pops up almost as a theme. This is definitely the clarinet album. And it's not on every track, but it's sort of there on a few tracks. It sort of pops up, and certainly when he's sort of reflecting longingly and warmly on his childhood, it's always there. So in terms of what I liked, well, I think
I'm guessing most of it.
Most of it, yeah. Boy from Michigan, The Rusty Bull, I've already mentioned. It does get a bit kooky with Mike and Julie, but that's okay. That's okay. It's not too wistful. And then, The Only Baby, his takedown of the American dream, which is a theme that runs throughout, but really comes to prominence in that. I really love the way he referred to that thing in the White House.
Yes.
Which I thought was just delivered with such biting venom. And then just when you think it's all over, there's a really sort of Elton John-esque ballad at the end called Billy, which is just nice.
Which is the thing that's been singing. That's the thing that's been played a lot on Six Music.
Right. So, unsurprisingly, really. So yeah, really like this album. I feel like it's a definite. He's never lost form, so I'm not going to say return to form, but it's up there.
I know what you mean, yes. I'm kind of the same. I'll be surprised. Oh my god, they're agreeing again. Keep agreeing on shit, yeah. But I do. I think. But interesting enough, from the first time I listened to it, this actually took me a few more listens to get into than previous albums. So the first album I was a bit cold. I was amused by some of the lyrics, but I was a bit cold on it musically, thinking, okay, are we just retreading old ground without adding anything new here? But then it kind of coalesced a bit more. But the things that have always appealed to me before about his writing are still there, obviously. The acidic wit, the lyrical humour. I think it's on, I've written down somewhere, rhetorical figure, I've always been an assonance man.
Yes.
It's just a brilliantly pun-worthy line. It's fantastic.
It's almost Shakespearean. It is,
So because of that, it is that thing of Penguin goes to the personal honesty and in typical John Grant style, if you listen to the lyrics, it's not exactly a light and cheery record.
It's presented as such.
Yes, but it's not because he doesn't really do light and cheery particularly. You dealt with the Only Baby, which is a thing on Transamerica, which bizarrely is a track that I like, but similarly a track that I also have problems with. And my one main criticism of the album is that song particularly, and a couple of other tracks, are far longer than they really need to be. I mean, The Only Baby goes on for almost 10 minutes, and 3.5 minutes of that is going The Only Baby. The Only Baby. I could have done with that, to be honest. Yeah. Well, for instance, when a radio edit version would have been welcome. But that's a minor quibble. Because I think you're right. I think it is the best work he's done since Penguin Ghost. Love the start. The opening track, title track, has bursts of sax in it as well, which reminded me very much of Bowie.
Yes.
And the way it was, particularly in the way it was utilised in the track. Also, really, really liked. He says, trying to get to the it's going to go. Yes, dear listeners. Because I lost my notes for this particular thing.
Scott lost his notes for this podcast.
I'm now having to look on a second phone for my thing. What? So Billy, I agree, is brilliant track. Also, rhetorical figure itself, really liked. Country Fair is a song that's grown on me and grown on me as my listens have gone on, which is the second track on the album. So you have Boy from Michigan, Country Fair, and Rusty Bull, which is just a really, really great opening kind of triumvirate of songs before you go into obviously Cruise Room, which is strangely not about Tom Cruise.
Who'd have thought?
Who'd have thought? Yeah.
Who'd have thought?
Yeah. Although maybe it was about Tom
maybe
Cruise.
it was.
Who knows? But yes, this is most definitely, if you haven't listened to John Grant before, a good introduction to John Grant.
Yeah, actually it is.
If you have, you probably already know this is a good album. If you've been a bit kind of since Pale Green Ghosts or even Queen of Denmark first album, this is
Come Back.
Where to come back.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, thumbs up.
Yeah, definitely.
Moving on, we go to the Veronicas Human. So last podcast we reviewed Godzilla from the Veronicas, and now we have the companion album Human. Now, for those listening to the last podcast will realise that I kind of thought this was meant to be a more acoustic, stripped back affair, but clearly I misread whatever quote it was that I read about the album.
I put that in my notes, like Scott said.
It clearly isn't. But I think there still is a difference. So whilst Godzilla, I think, definitely leans more towards their old style guitar pop influenced approach to pop music, this definitely leans more towards electro pop and very much a modern electro pop approach.
Yeah.
As shown by the amount of featured that appears
There's a few feet. There's quite a few feet on this album.
Yeah, there are many feet. And it's also more of a ballady focused record, I think, than the Godzilla album. So that was Godzilla. Several of the songs are also from tracks they've released as singles during their 7-year hiatus, trying to get an album together. So On Your Side, Think of Me, and Biting My Tongue all appear from that period. For me, it's a weaker album than Godzilla, which is not to say there aren't strong songs on it. I think, particularly Think of Me, Jealous, and Biting My Tongue, which come together about halfway through the album. There are 3 songs in a row. I think that's really where the album is strongest. Also the opener, Without You, which is a really lovely ballad. Highlight of the album is possibly the chorus of Movie Star, although the rest of the song I'm less sure about. And it's solid. Ultimately, I prefer the Veronicas with a bit more oomph and pop rock attitude than this. I mean, it's fine, but I was hoping for a bit more inventiveness, if anything else.
We reviewed the Gorillaz last time, and I thought that had plenty of sort of popness about it, and as exactly as you described, that sort of development and edginess as well. And I would, and because Scott says this will be different, I was expecting this to be a much more stripped back, maybe more personal record. But it actually turns out almost as loud and hedonistic as Gorillaz in many places. Although, as a flip side, it does open very softly, so it kind of almost sets the scene for that kind of his. Right,
Without You is very.
You've had the Fame and Pop and Glory album. Here's the real stripped back, nasty, human version.
Indeed.
But actually, it turns out, as you say, into an album that offers huge pop tunes, like properly made pop tunes that don't have those rough edges, perhaps, of their counterparts on the prior album. But although I did like Lies on Your Side and Think of Me, Jealous. I mean, they're all big charting sort of pop tunes, So overall, as a consequence, it was much easier to listen to, but was it less engaging? Yeah.
For me, definitely.
Yeah, for me, I think much more pop-tastic this, but it kind of lacked a something. Movie Star I've noted, in LA as well. I agree with you. I think they're good tracks also. But I actually just felt that it lacked that sort of bite of the first record. Whereas I thought this one might be the one where the bite actually comes in.
Yeah. It'd have been nice to hear a stripped down version anyway. But
2 albums in
2 albums
in 2 months.
Exactly. It's
what's wrong with you?
and the fact that, and as I said, they've been pretty much trying to get records out for 7 years. So
yeah,
frankly, good on from just sticking it all out there.
Yeah, it's out there now, which is great.
So next up, actually, I having said how good I was for writing down stuff.
If you got your notes.
Well, no, because not only did we review that's where I fell down, because not only did we review the Godzilla by the Veronicas, but we also reviewed an album of theirs, the one that came out 7 years ago.
Yes.
And I still haven't written down when that was, so must do better. However, Tyler the Creator, Call Me If You Get Lost, 6th album, unbelievably, from Tyler. We last reviewed him back on podcast 7 of 2017.
Wow.
For his 4th album, Flower Boy, which you liked a lot.
I did.
Do you like this one?
Yes, I do. It's a great hip hop album. It's a great pop album. It's a great rap album. It's got angst, but it's got a momentum that carries on all the way through. It remains strong all the way through. It's balanced fairly lyrically. I've written down here in my notes mature hip hop. I don't know what that means. I think I'm thinking back to mature pop because we've talked about that a lot recently.
We have, yes.
So maybe I'm thinking, oh, this is mature hip hop. What do you mean, Peter? It's great use of...
Is it mature because it has sweary?
It has sweary, but not sweary. It has a great use of synths and funk. It apologises for the use of the B word more than once as well.
It does, actually, yes.
A couple of moments of self-reflection. It's just like, it's gangster. Actually, no, I don't like being gangster anymore. I don't like using those words. So it does that. It obviously talks about BLM and the pandemic. Obviously gets a shoehorn. Gets a showcase as well. A bit of Me Too. All the hashtags are there. Call Me When You Get Lost is recurrently shouted out throughout the album.
It is indeed,
which I quite enjoyed.
You know what? For the first time I listened to it, I didn't get that at all.
Yeah, it's there.
Yeah,
Call Me When You Get Lost.
Yeah,
and I quite like that because it's just like it literally is taking you on a journey, and you've got to keep up with the crew. But if you don't keep up, just shout. I really like Lemonhead. Was Your Name the one dripping with 70s funk?
You mean the big pop hit, really? Because it is by far the poppiest moment on the album.
Sweet, I Thought You Wanted to Dance. That's the one with the dash of reggae, which I will say again later on this podcast.
That goes full on reggae at that point.
It does.
I was expecting Sting and Shaggy to come in,
and that one also features. Maybe it was just me, but what sounds like the opening riff of "Take Me Out" by Franz Ferdinand. There's a kind of
Haven't spotted that,
just me, but maybe not.
Yeah.
And then there's the very deep and a bit too honest Wilshire.
Wilshire's very good.
Love song about meeting a woman who's a good friend, and it all just goes wrong from there. So yeah,
pretty much, yes.
Starts romantic, ends bleak.
It does indeed.
So yeah, overall, once again, Tyler the Creator.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion on this album has changed a bit. So, dare I say it, particularly for older listeners, today was my 3rd listen of said album.
It's cliche, but it's true.
It is cliche, it's true. I mean, we both know that it's true, and we both occasionally come to these podcasts having not listened to 3 times the various albums, wow. and I always feel guilty when I don't because I know that quite often the third listen is the one that you're going to go, oh, that's what it's about. That's how it hangs together. Yeah, okay, got it. And that was how I felt about this record. Although, bizarrely, I quite liked the first listen. Second listen, I was like, I've wrote some notes down about this. What the fucking was I was talking about? This is not very good. But then the third listen again, I was like, yeah, got it, yeah. So yeah, whilst I probably don't like it quite as much as you, I love the start of the So Baudelaire, partly because I'm familiar with the song that's sampled in it, which is instrumental track called Siesta by the very, very, very excellent jazz prog rock drummer Billy Cobham. I was going, oh, it's Billy Cobham, excellent, and that goes into Corso, which is really fun. As you say, What's Your Name is where it gets really kind of poppy, and that's the kind of thing. Don't know if it has been a single, but it would be, if you were listening to this album, that's one of the ones you'd be picking out going, that's a single.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's mostly sung rather than rapped. Lumberjack, which comes after that, which I think is also a really good track, and also one of the hardest hitting tracks on the album. And then, as you've said, you've covered this Sweet, and I thought we wanted to dance. Also, really good and interesting. The fact that it comes in with the kind of the whole reggae vibe. Also, you didn't mention it, but I really liked Rise featuring Daisy World.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a really nice track. It's one of the ones I've come back to over the last couple of days. Our old mate Pharrell Williams props up on Juggernaut. Wilshire, I should say, is whilst not the end of the album, because Safari is the end of the album.
Feels like it should be.
Feels like it does feel like it should be.
Yeah.
And it is. It's a really well constructed track.
Very well constructed track, and feels like it should close things off with a lovely romantic tale that's just bleak.
Thankfully, we like bleak on this podcast.
We do. We like darkness. Yeah.
So, moving swiftly on and moving swiftly to indie, we have the debut album from Pom Pom Squad, Death of a Cheerleader. Now, this probably has my favourite start to the album of any of the albums in the podcast, it has to be said.
Yeah, with you there.
The eerie retro soundtrack, which devolves into the frankly indie genius of Head Cheerleader, which is frankly one of my tracks of the year so far. Sadly, what follows is not quite up to the standard of Head Cheerleader, but it is still enjoyable, and you basically got a 35-minute trip through grunge, pop punk, shoegaze, 60s pop, and more, frankly, as vocalist Maya Berin, who is the leader of said band, takes us on this very weird high school fantasy trip. So obviously, after you've had that opening, you go straight into kind of Crying, which I immediately kind of thought of as a almost kind of, if you imagine the Grease soundtrack was redone as a kind of grungy type thing, then Crying would be on the soundtrack, as would Forever, which features later on in the album. Love it when it goes really rocky. So there's a track called Lux, and there's a track called Shame Reactions, which I like just the title of, never mind the actual musical content of. And Drunk Voicemail towards the end as well is just absolute genius. Add to that, there's a very loving cover of Tommy James and the Shondells pop classic Crimson and Clover, which was famously influenced Sweet Jane by Velvet Underground. Not ripped off at all. And yeah, it's just, this was another one of those albums that we've several reviewed in the last couple of years, where I was just kind of thinking, okay, it's not doing anything new.
No.
But what it's doing is done well, and it's quite fun.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And I would quite happily, when they release the next album, I'll be going, oh, what does that sound like? Not going to set the world alight, but yeah, fun.
Yeah. There's a double risk of missing this album when you're listening to it, because it does rattle along at quite a pace.
It does.
And it's quite short. But I'll be honest with you, for all the positive things that you've said there, and I agree with all of them, it doesn't really stick with me. In that I've listened to it repeated times, and I can't really think about it. I can't really sort of focus on, so I've appreciated it when I've been listening to it,
Yeah.
but I can't really refer back to it. I'm like,
Nothing's grabbing, nothing's
grabbed
holding
me.
on.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with it. Soundcheck, the opening's brilliant. Head Cheerleader is brilliant. John Voicemail is brilliant. Forever I quite liked. Shame Reactions, again, you mentioned that. And it would be remiss not to mention massive Courtney Love vibes from here and there and everywhere as well.
Yes.
If you're a fan of her. But at the end of it all, I'm just like, I can't even say solid, because it's just not solid enough to stick with me.
So it's the solid way of listening to it, but when you're not listening to it,
it's gone. It's left.
Yeah.
And it's a debut album, so I don't want to be cruel, because no doubt there is much more potential.
Be cruel to be kind.
And the cover of Crimson and Clover is okay. It's more than okay. It's good. So I'm obviously excited to hear more from the band. But for me, this was a little bit of a miss.
Moving on again. So you're probably the only artist on this list that our children would be familiar with without parental intervention. This is Doja Cat and Planet Her, third album in as many years from, I actually wrote down what her actual name is, Amala Ratna Sandili Dlamini.
That was so natural, it was like you weren't reading it.
I know, yeah. Also, I'm almost certain I have mispronounced pretty much all of those 4 words.
50% maybe.
There's probably a reason why she decided to call herself Doja Cat, frankly. So, an album that our children would probably want to listen to, even though lyrically perhaps not.
They're not allowed.
Yeah. Peter.
Occupying the space between pop and rap, obviously.
Clearly, yes.
Youth appeal, elements of dance hall thrown in, a bit of reggaeton. That was a thing for about 5 minutes, I think.
Apparently so.
A few years ago. This is a great repeat listen, and bounce along listening to it, but also bounces along at a pace.
Yeah.
It's a great summer album. I don't think I've said that yet this year. Woo! Cliche.
Tis some.
Yeah. With the tops and the windows down, driving through the city. Perfect. It's a good pop album for the summer. And it has a very, if I'm to break it down, it has a very strong opening. I think the opening few tracks are great. Woman, Naked, Payday. I hadn't realised actually until I went through this list. All one word. Options.
Yes.
Yeah. Options is also good. Kiss Me More, 3 words. Also very good. So yeah, no, it's just a good sort of bounce along sort of summer pop album. I can't criticise because I actually quite liked it.
I can criticise, but I'm not going to particularly, because most of the positive things you said about it, I also think true. I do think, again, I agree, it kind of starts off with stuff alright. First one, I'm not, that's better. Naked is fun, and has been, like several of her tracks, and is also part of the reason why she's become very big in the last few years, because she's done quite a few tracks that have been TikTokable, as the young kids would say.
Yeah.
And Naked is lyrically one of those ones that has lent itself to that. Payday, which comes after that, reminded me of Grimes. The start of it, the kind of slightly more squeaky kind of voice thing. I thought, oh, she got Grimes singing the song, but actually it's actually her. So it starts off like that, and it goes on, and as you say, towards the end, "Kiss Me More," which I think is the last track. Love the use of the physical Olivia Newton-John in that. Actually, literally uses that as the main theme, which I like. The middle of the album is like middle of the album's hard work, partly because I think it's overly ballad heavy. Which is not to say there isn't good stuff in there. In fact, probably my favourite track on the album is "Being Like This," which I really liked. I was also familiar with a couple of tracks on it, I'm presuming because Child has played them or because they've been on the radio. So I Need to Know and I Don't Do Drugs, which features Ariana Grande. We're both familiar for me in that kind of point. So start and end I felt good, middle a bit kind of and also from what I'd read about her, reading up on her, part of me kind of expected more because I'd heard she was quite boundary pushing, and a lot of this sounded like just about everybody else.
Yeah.
So in that sense, my expectations weren't quite met. But as you rightly said, taking that out of the equation, for what it is, it's still a pretty good record.
It's a pretty good record. It's a very good record. It's not boundary pushing, but it's very enjoyable. Repeated listenings are rewarding.
Okay. So we finish with Sault. You'll remember that we reviewed in the Christmas podcast both their albums from last year. Both their untitled albums, which had titles. Last year. Which featured very high on many critics' lists and made it into our list indeed as well. This is another album from this London collective, which features UK producer Inflow, Chicago rapper Kid Sister, and quite substantially on this particular album, singer Leo Soul. Lyrically, it centres around the lives of kind of black men predominantly, but also black women in, again, predominantly the UK, but also America, just as a general kind of thing. And it's an interesting album because it's essentially just over 30 minutes long, 34 minutes long, and it's quite a short, almost kind of like a short story in a way. In a way, and it hangs together, I think, better as a album and a complete piece of work more than the albums we reviewed last year do, even though I don't think it's as good as the albums we reviewed last year. Love London Gangs, which near the start of the album, heavy bass riff, and the lines, "It's a fight for life and no one's doing it right," which I think in a way kind of almost sums up what the whole record is about, really, that kind of whole thing of being which theme that keeps coming back about almost being kind of trapped within your environment and your circumstances, and how hard it is to get out of where you are. And that track, I should say the first track is called Ha Ha, which is in a way ironic in the fact that it's kind of almost kind of upbeat kind of thing, and then you kind of go into stuff that's not kind of upbeat. So London Gangs then slips effortlessly into I think it's Trap Life, which sonically reminded me of the band Ruby.
Yeah.
Who, for listeners who don't know, Ruby were around in the 90s, which was Silverfish's Leslie Rankin and another bloke who's Mark something, I can't remember what band he was in, but had that kind of beat, drum beat, and the thing was just, I was suddenly thinking, oh, that, which was good because it then made me listen to their Saltpeter album again Yesterday, which is still absolutely fucking brilliant. Highlight of the record for me is possibly Bitter Streets, where you have the nicely looped bass riff and drum combo, and then the kind of thing about bitter streets and bittersweet combined, going back and forth about usually the same thing about being in a kind of relationship where, again, you're kind of maybe in love or maybe connected to somebody, and then you lose track of them, and you're losing track of them probably because they've come to a sticky end because they've chosen the wrong path. Again, a bit trapped in your environment. It has that line in it, which I wrote down somewhere. Yeah, I remember when you were young, you made friends with a girl and you didn't leave, fell in love with the streets. Which again, I think kind of sums up a lot of where this genre of music is at the moment. And sadly, we are in a situation where you know, things don't seem to be getting any better in this situation, where people are kind of trapped in this downward spiral of things without people people are telling you this is what's going to happen to your life, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, which is sad. Which is not to say there's not light. It's not to say there's not light on this record either, because you get to the end of the record and you've got light in your hands, which is a beautiful kind of R&B track, and then kind of goes off sideways a bit, but it allows, and I think the star of the album is Leo Soul, who is ever present throughout this record, more than she has been, or more than any artist has been on their previous albums, I think. And I think her vocals are the shining kind of light in this record. So it's kind of an R&B record that's not really an R&B record, that kind of is an R&B record. And if more modern R&B records were more like this, I'd listen to a lot more of them.
I think it has the... I disagree with you. I think it has the momentum of the second album from last year. So I remember the two albums, they were both exceptionally experimental, but also very well constructed. But this album feels like it, to me, it feels like it took over from where Untitled #2, Rise,
yes,
title of,
yes,
took off or left off, and for me, I felt it kicked off with more commercial possibilities.
Absolutely. But I think that's because it almost, I think it's because it hangs together more as a.
It does hang together
more. It's almost like there's a sole purpose for this sole purpose of this record, whereas the previous albums have gone off in more directions, up and down, rather than staying. This one's more linear. Yeah,
which I felt. Maybe it's just me. I felt more comfortable with. I think it just, for me, this album had more potential as an album, I guess, as a consequence. Okay, so maybe the critics, it won't be as impressed with the 2 volumes appearing in their end of year list, but and ourselves included. But actually, I felt to me that this hung together much more clearly, and was certainly. I felt I got to know the band more, because there's a lot of mystery around Sault.
There are, and there's still obviously. I didn't mention obviously that Little Sims does show up on one of the tracks.
But I felt I learned a lot more about them. Either directly, you've got Mike's story in there, which is pretty brutal. But indirectly as well, you have tracks like Alcohol, Trap Live, Bitter Streets, which you've already talked about. So I began to get a sense of where this band is and who they are and where they've come from, and I love that juxtaposition between the sort of London sound and that sort of increased use of sort of 60s 70s soul bleeding in from the US. I thought that's
And use of, and again the use of strings that's similarly on the two previous records reviewed from their use of strings is very good.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. So I found that was lovely. Best exemplified on the track "You from London," which was fun. And it ends with
run horses.
yeah, exactly. And it ends with a really slow number as well, "Lights in Your Hands," which was nice.
Yeah,
that's a nice track. That's a nice track, and I mean that in a lovely sort of way. So for me, actually, I preferred. Maybe it's the commerciality of it. Maybe it's the fact it is linear, and I don't think too experimentally these days. I prefer this potentially to the previous two albums, but the previous two albums obviously set a very high watermark creatively.
Yes.
Which I think this fulfills the potential of by actually offering up something that's quite accessible.
Basically, what he just said. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think
although I take all of that back because commerciality only available for 99 days.
Yes. Yeah, I didn't mention that. Yeah, yes. This album was released with a proviso that it's only available for 99 days. You can order it, although bizarrely, as we discovered earlier on, the vinyl version of it doesn't come out until October. But you can only actually order that within the 99-day period.
Yeah.
You can also, I should say this as well, because this is relevant, you can also go on to, if you search for Sault and Bandcamp, you can download this album for free, if you like. You can also choose to pay the band for the album, which if you're going to do so, I would suggest you do.
It's worth it. Very much worth it.
But it is a pay what you want option, and you do get the MP3, the looseless version of it as well. So you can basically download the above CD quality version of this record for nothing if you so desire. But we would desire that you would actually pay the artists some money.
Exactly.
If you chose to do that, it's worth it.
Yeah. So yes, exactly. So there's the final twist. It's commercial, but yet far from it in the traditional sense.
And also, I'm going to say one last thing on it because we are sat here with some alcohol.
Yes.
One of the things I liked about that particular track is it's I felt because it's a repetitive song. It's a theme, another theme that she mentioned that goes to the album. Quite a lot of the songs lyrically are quite repetitive.
True.
But this isn't a problem. But it has that kind of almost lullaby type feel to some of the songs where you're hearing something and it relaxes you, makes you calm, perhaps makes you sleepy, which is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Particularly with the alcohol thing, but it's like basically this is a lesson, kids. In alcohol it says, "Oh alcohol, it was only supposed to be one."
Yeah. True.
Amen.
Right.
On that note, join us again for podcast 6 when we're reviewing. Actually, I don't know what we're reviewing.
Right.
Some stuff.
Some more stuff.
Until then, ta-ta for now.
All right.